And here, he remembered what happened to his little sister a long time ago, and he said to himself, it was spring, just before Rosie's 10th birthday, on that very day when she was alone in the forest without her nanny. She was struck by a horse ridden by a drunken knight, and Rosie left this world that day. And Mom, she completely lost her mind from that day on. And she punished not only the stable boy who provided the horse, but also the knight who caused the accident from their family to even their grandparents and their young children. And the mother imposed the same punishment on them all. While the father criticized the mother's excessive behavior, and since then, the father and mother have been completely separated. And today, it seemed that the mother was losing her mind again this time, just like in the past. This is my duty now. And at the same time, he was saying to himself for this reason, it would be better to keep my mother away from this matter, so he told her, Mom, I will take care of it myself. And he finished saying to himself, since the mother's anger can erupt anywhere. And here, Gila said, the results show that the young lady is only suffering from a minor bruise on her right wrist. Since she has been treated, she shouldn't have any difficulty moving. Fortunately, there are no other serious injuries. And here, Talisa said in relief after hearing this, thank goodness, it's a relief. Then she said to Eric, you're right. I think I need some fresh air to clear my head a little. Then she kissed Misa's head and said, I'm sure you'll handle things skillfully, so I'll leave the rest to you. And she left the room immediately, and Gila said, rest well, madam. Then she looked at Eric and said, well then, I'll be leaving. But Eric said, wait a minute, I just said that there are no other major injuries right now. Are you sure? And here, Gila said, in fact, the young woman has several deep wounds accumulated on her body. Unfortunately, it's been a long time since they occurred, so they can't be treated, so I didn't bother mentioning it. Here, Eric looked at her and said, I understand. So she felt nervous and told him, but I'll never spread this information. As you know, I've never revealed any confidential information or made any accidental mistakes, even if I was drunk. And Eric said, You haven't had much work lately, have you? And Gila nervously said, I think you misunderstood. She was shocked when Eric told her, start working here from tomorrow morning. And she said, excuse me? And Eric said, I'll tell the head maid, Idel. And here, Eric looked at her with cold eyes when she said, starting tomorrow? It's very sudden. But Eric told her before she left, I hope you understand me. And she said nervously, yes, sir. And Eric, you should leave now. And she did. And he waited until she closed the door. Then he looked at Mesa and said, I know you're not sleeping. What's the reason? There must be at least one reason behind your behavior. And Mesa's hands started trembling in fear. So he told her, Mesa, it's okay. Just tell me. And here Mesa opened her eyes, and he said to her, why did you cause this commotion today? But Mesa turned her head to the other side and said, there is a reason. And Eric, say it. But she told him, it's hard to say. And Eric, yeah, Mesa, don't ever hurt yourself again. Break something else if you have to. And here Mesa nervously said, okay. But Eric suddenly approached her and shouted at her nervously, saying, Mesa, I'm not saying don't do anything. I'm just saying don't get hurt. Do you really understand? Please promise me now that you won't get hurt. And Mesa nervously said, I promise you that. And here, Eric said calmly, good. Get some rest now. If you're hungry, don't hesitate to call for someone. Is there anything you want to tell me? And here Mesa said to him, about that woman earlier, will she be my maid? And here Eric mocked her and said, are you curious about that in the midst of everything? Well, since you asked, didn't you like her? Luckily, I heard she's a student of a famous doctor, and her skills in treating trauma are very good, and she seems to have a strong spirit, and she can easily catch 2 wolves. She also has a relatively heavy jaw, but Mesa didn't understand, so she said to him, what do you mean? And Eric, I mean, she is not someone who can be easily influenced, and she hasn't been caught or tortured as a doctor, but still. Nevertheless, just for safety, maybe it's best to keep acting your part for now, even in front of her. Remember Colin, who was at the door when you visited the Imperial Palace? From now on, I plan to continue assigning Colin to guard the second-floor gallery. By the way, Colin is a knight who uses a sword with his left hand after losing 2 fingers because he was previously a victim of torture. He's the most trustworthy person I know, but I haven't discussed anything about you with him, so don't worry too much. Anyway, and since you're injured, I think I'll have to take a break from knightly duties for a while. Then he said to himself, perhaps because I'm the only one who knows her secrets. I'll be right back after taking care of some urgent matters in the morning. And he continued, saying to himself, Mesa often shows different expressions unexpectedly in front of me, and she switches from worry to relaxation at any time. And here her face turned red from embarrassment, and Eric continued, saying, or have a lively expression as you do now. And when she suddenly stood up and approached him, she said, does that mean a lot of time and a lot of conversations? And Eric nervously said to himself, with eyes full of expectation. And here Mesa grabbed him and said to him, as soon as you get closer, prepare your heart. Now? Tomorrow? And Eric, what do you mean? And here he said to himself, even her puzzling actions exceed expectations. And here he shouted at her nervously, saying, what's wrong with you? Do you still want to do that, even after you got hurt like this? And Mesa looked at him nervously, and he continued, saying to himself, I can't help but get angry sometimes at her stupid ideas. So he told her, don't even think about it until you're completely recovered. Then he looked at her and said to himself, for this woman who is completely different from me, she lived restricted by rules and custom. So he said to her, why do you want to do that so badly? And Mesa nervously said, he didn't even touch the princess. So will he go to the temple to annul the marriage? Wouldn't it be logical to clarify things quickly? She's about to marry Lacan Crispin. And here Eric was shocked by her words, saying, what is this sudden talk? So he put his hand on his head and said, I can't believe it. Then he started thinking and said to himself, is she upset about Emperor's meaningless words? So he grabbed her and said to her, Mesa, I have absolutely no intention of canceling this marriage. Let's start. We have a whole life ahead of us. There's no need to rush when we barely know each other. It seems you have strange ideas again. If there's anything that intrigues you or worries you, please ask me directly. There's nothing I can't answer. Have I ever hidden anything from you? You've seen all kinds of documents whenever you had the chance to sit on my lap. I've shown you all the secrets. So what am I hiding from you now? Anyway, just rest today. Shall I call the maids if you can't sleep? And Mesa, why? And here Eric said to her, don't you usually enjoy spending time in my study? It seemed like you were having a good time. But Mesa said, it's not enjoyable at all. And here Eric said in surprise, not enjoyable? So Mesa said, the kitchen and the sink are both busy and noisy. In the study your hands are busy, and it's quiet. I can hear every maid speaking clearly from there. And this is what they were saying, the princess always stays in the servant's room. And here Eric said, that's right. So you're saying you go to the servant's room to gather information? Did you do that at the Imperial Palace as well? And here Mesa rejoiced and said, correct. And here Eric started asking her and said, why hasn't the royal chef been replaced yet? Do you know how much money the head maid, Nymeria, took from Lady Malika? And here Mesa said joyfully, I know everything. And Eric looked at her in amazement and said, that's impressive. And Mesa, do you know? Idol already said that she hates the white-haired head servant. And I remembered the maids whispering and saying, don't talk nonsense. Adel is also tall. I like big men. And Eric said in surprise, big. And here, understanding, he said, oh, wait. Does our head servant have a crush on Idol? And here Mesa laughed because he understood her, but he said, but she's already engaged. and Mesa shocked him when she told him what Idol said about the head servant. "I'm trying to marry a stupid head servant like him," she said. "Isn't it true that the head maid is still single? Isn't it?" Here, Eric thought to himself, this is incredibly amazing. It seems that every action I've taken so far has had meaning. Perhaps. He then lay down beside her and said, "I want to talk to you privately, Mesa." Mesa rejoiced, misunderstanding. She thought to herself, "Today?" But her hopes were dashed when Eric asked, "Why did Lady Malika spend money on a head maid named Nymeria? Was it because of an accident? Or was she coveting the position of head maid for herself?" Mesa looked at him silently and didn't answer, turning her head away. So Eric said, "We can get closer quickly if you tell me this." But she said to him sharply, and Eric didn't understand, saying, "What?" And here Mesa said, "We'll meet tomorrow, Malika. The 3 pillars of the royal palace." And Eric, "What? The 3 pillars of the palace?" Here, he understood and thought to himself, the 3 pillars of the royal palace refers to the 3 prominent families that represent the kingdom of Esquier: Cladogny, Salakis, and Crispin. Among them, the king's relatives, the Salakis family, were purged a few years ago and are currently living in obscurity. So here he remembered when Lady Lacan stopped him and said, "Wait a moment." And at that time, Eric said to her, "Isn't it rude to leave like that?" And at that time, a lady was watching them, and Eric noticed her. It was the maid Malika who was spying on them. So he said to Mesa, "The pillar meeting with Lady Malika from the Crispin family is likely. I need to send spies to both sides to find out what's happening." After hearing his words, Mesa thought to herself, "I know my thoughts are silly now. However, what if he's planning something foolish? If that's the case, what should I do?" She was referring to Eric, who suddenly kissed her on the cheek where she had placed her hand, making her feel embarrassed. Feeling nervous and embarrassed, Eric said, "This is a reward for answering my question." She looked at him in astonishment and embarrassment.